All right, today we're going to do an interview with Mr. Harris, talk about what's changed over the years at Mount St. Joe. I guess you can introduce yourself if you'd like.
Yeah, my name is Jody Harris. This is my 39th year teaching at Mount St. Joe. I started teaching in January of 1985. I graduated from Mount St. Joe in 1979. I teach in the social studies department. I've taught world history. I've taught U.S. history. I've taught American government, advanced placement American government and politics. I coached varsity baseball here for 28 years. The last 3 as the head coach. And I coached the JV football team in the late 80s, early 90s, and some freshman football in the late 90s, early 2000s.
All right, well, I guess we can get into the questions now. What was Mount St. Joe like when you got here?
Well, I mean, physically, the campus was much different. I mean, the only buildings that are here that were there when I was here was St. Joseph Hall, Riken Hall, the Tower, and Memorial Gymnasium. Those were the only buildings that were here that are still here.
Right.
Those other buildings obviously have been here, built in the last 40 years.
What is it like culture-wise, and is there more diversity, less diversity, like people more inclusive? How do you feel about that?
Okay. I think the general makeup of the school, as far as the demographics are concerned, has not changed all that much. It is still a school that considers itself diverse, and in a lot of ways we are. What that diversity looks like today compared to what it was in, for example, my time there, that may have changed. But the idea that we're able to educate all, I think, is a strength of this school and has been the strength of this school. If you're talking about things that haven't changed, it would be that.
Aside from the buildings, like you mentioned previously, what do you think is different? Do you think anything's different culture-wise, or
Well, I mean, I think we've talked about in class the idea of an evolving standard.
Right.
And I think the school has done that as well. If you go back and take a look at the graduating classes of the 70s and the hairstyles of the 70s, obviously the school adjusted to that particular time period.
Right.
So I think that's a strength of the school too, because if you're going to stay around for almost 150 years, I think that's going to be important for you to be able to sustain yourself and continue to recruit students here.
Okay. And your time here, what have you changed? Mr. Walker talked about a Big Brother program. I'm curious to see with you. Obviously you've influenced people with baseball and sports and stuff, and in the classroom as well, but what do you think is the biggest thing you've accomplished, change-wise?
Well, I mean, I think as a teacher, if you're going to be really good at your craft, because that's what it is, it's a craft, that you have to be able to see what's available to you now and the way in which teachers communicate to students, students communicate with one another. And that changes, and obviously has changed significantly with the introduction of the iPad, and as well as just the explosion of the information age. And so those kind of things you have to adjust to. And I think from a personal standpoint, COVID, while it was incredibly difficult, one of the most difficult times that I can recall here teaching-wise, it also forced me into addressing and embracing digital things that can enhance my teaching.
Right.
So it's one of those unintended consequences of something like that.
So we talked about change. What do you think you've changed in the sports world? Have you influenced new teams, new coaches?
How have I influenced them?
Right. Do you think you've maybe brought a coach up that maybe is sufficient in the program now, or?
Well, I mean, if you take a look, if we focus in on the baseball program, okay, Dave Norton was the head coach here for over 30 years. Okay, he was the outfield JV coach when I was a freshman and played in the outfield as a freshman, and so he became the head coach, and him and I coached together for 25 years. Mr. Cameron came along from Cardinal Gibbons, where he was the head coach, and we coached together for 20 of those years. Coach Kraska, who's now the head coach, he was with us for 10 years. So in that sense, there's a tremendous amount of continuity,
right,
which I think lends itself to success most of the time.
You think you guys being that close and being together for so long helps the program?
I think it does, because the players themselves are going to respond to the kind of environment that the coaches create, and the camaraderie that existed between us as coaches, right? Those players saw that,
right,
and I think that enhances a team camaraderie as well.
I agree. All right, one final question for you. Since you started teaching, you can change one thing. Since all your leaders you've been here, what would you change?
If I could change one thing about teaching here,
Teaching, anything you want.
anything I want.
Just it has to be related to Mount St. Joe. You can change anything you want.
Okay.
Tough question.
It is a tough question because those kind of decisions are usually made above my pay grade, but I think we just need to continue to evolve as a school. And I think the success moving forward is retaining the talented teachers that we have on staff here. If you take a look, you talk about things that have stayed the same, that new teachers come in, there's a camaraderie among them, right? They take the place of the veteran teachers, and so there's been this fortunate influx of really talented people that have worked here. And moving forward, if you take a look at what's happening in society as far as the shortage of teachers across the board, right, to be able to have these kind of talented people, I think for a long-term basis will help sustain this school. And that's where I think we need to address those kinds of things.
I agree. All right, well, thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Okay.